My girlfriend said, "Guys are always interested." I stayed silent. Then I named them. 2 days later, no one was laughing anymore. It was the kind of line she liked to throw out when the room was full. Not because it was true, because it was performative, like the champagne flutes, the candlelight, the careful laugh she kept in a glass case for donors and women who used the word brand like it was a religion. We were at the Greyhaven Maritime Museum, which sounded classy until you remembered it was basically an old brick warehouse with $1 million view and a tax write-off personality. The fundraiser for her clinic launch was in full swing. String lights, jazz trio, waiters gliding like ghosts, everyone dressed in that expensive neutral color palette that says, "I'm rich enough to pretend I don't sweat." She was in a white silk dress that made her look like she belonged on a billboard, the kind of dress designed to be remembered, the kind of dress designed to make a man standing next to her feel like a prop. I was the prop. Her hand rested lightly on my arm, not affectionate, possessive. The same way a person touches a handbag they paid too much for, just to remind themselves it's still there. She leaned toward her friends, 3 women in matching minimalist jewelry and identical smiles, and said it with a little shrug, like she was describing the weather. Guys are always interested. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The women laughed. Not big laughter, not real laughter. The kind that keeps their lipstick perfect. One of them, the tall one with the surgical cheekbones, looked at me like I was an old chair. "It's exhausting," she sighed. "You can't even breathe without someone taking it as an invitation." My girlfriend smiled, and her eyes flicked to the room the way a good host scans for photographers. "Right? Like, you're just trying to exist." The jazz trio hit a soft, smooth note that felt like oil on water. Somewhere behind us, a donor was telling a story about my friend on the board, and everyone leaned in like he was reading scripture. I watched her, not the way a boyfriend watches his girlfriend, the way a man watches a glass he suspects is already cracked. She squeezed my arm once, light pressure, polite ownership, and turned her face toward me, eyebrows raised, like this was my cue to play along, to laugh, to be safe, to be the guy who stays. I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just took a sip of my drink, club soda with lime, because I liked being sober in rooms full of people who thought they were too important to be careful. And then I named them. "Elliot Marsh," I said calmly. The laughter hiccuped but didn't stop. Someone assumed it was a joke. It always sounds like a joke when the quiet guy speaks. "Donovan Pike," I added. The tall friend's smile faltered for half a second, then returned like a mask slipping back into place. "And Dr. Halden Rourke." That did it. Not silence, not yet. But something colder moved through the circle like a draft, like the air conditioning suddenly remembered it was winter outside. My girlfriend's hand lifted off my arm as if she'd touched a hot pan. Her eyes widened just a fraction. Not guilt, not shame, surprise. The kind of surprise you get when the dog you forget exists suddenly speaks in a full sentence. The women stared at me, and in that half second, I saw them doing the math. Not the moral math, the social math. Do we know those men? Are those real names? Is he kidding? And if he's not, what does that make her? My girlfriend laughed. Too bright, too fast. "Babe," she said, voice sweet enough to rot teeth. "What are you even—" "I'm just agreeing with you," I said. I kept my tone mild, like I was discussing the menu. Guys are always interested. The tall one recovered first. She gave a little scoff, as if to say, "Men." "Okay, but everyone flirts. It doesn't mean anything." My girlfriend's laugh came out again, sharp at the edges. "Yeah, exactly. It's not." Her phone buzzed. Small sound, nothing dramatic. just a vibration against the clutch she held like it contained her bloodstream. She didn't look down at it right away. That's what gave it away. The pause, the micro delay, the instinct to pretend the device didn't exist, the way her fingers tightened around the clutch like a reflex. Then she glanced, just a flicker of her eyes, quick as a lie, and her whole face changed. Not much. If you didn't know her, you'd miss it. But I knew her. I knew the way her nostrils flared when she was irritated. I knew the tiny line that appeared between her eyebrows when she calculated. I knew the way her mouth softened when she was being sincere and the way it tightened when she was managing people. This was management. She tilted the clutch slightly, shielding the screen from anyone else, and the women leaned in closer, like they were magnets and she was metal. Then she tucked it away again, too casual, too clean. "I'm gonna go say hi to Dr. Kenley," she announced, naming a local philanthropist like a safe alibi. He's been so supportive. Supportive. That word had gotten a lot of miles lately. The way some couples use busy, the way people use unexpected expenses. Words that mean don't ask. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. A peck. Light. Public. Her lipstick left nothing behind. She was careful like that. "You're okay?" she murmured. Low voice, sweet, a question that was also a warning. I looked at her. I could have said 100 things. I could have made a scene. I could have been the unstable man she would later describe to anyone who asked. Instead, I smiled. Small. Controlled. "Of course," I said. "Go be supported." She flashed that bright clinic founder smile at the women and slipped away into the crowd, and the crowd opened for her like water. That was the thing about rooms like this. People didn't just move. They made space for status. I watched her navigate, hand on shoulders, laugh on cue, a gentle tilt of the head that made men lean in and women nod like disciples. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't getting swept up. She was steering. My glass clinked lightly against the table edge as I set it down. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. It wasn't pounding. It was quiet in the way a storm is quiet when it's still on the horizon. Behind me, the tall friend muttered, "That was weird." "Men get jealous," another one said with a little roll of the eyes. And there it was. The easiest story in the world. Jealous boyfriend. Insecure. Controlling. Must be exhausting for her. They wanted that story. It let them keep their world neat. I turned slightly, letting them see my face fully, and I gave them the calmest expression I owned. "I'm not jealous," I said. "Jealousy is what you feel when you're afraid you'll lose something you still want." They blinked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. I should have walked away. But I stayed long enough to watch their smiles struggle to find the right shape again. Then I drifted. Not stalking, not storming, just moving through the museum the way you move through a place you've already decided to leave. I passed the model ships in glass cases, old wooden hulls, tiny rigging lines, little flags stiff with age. Some plaque said something about a shipwreck in 1893. Another said something about storms and survival. It struck me how the museum loved tragedies, how it preserved disasters under perfect lighting and called it history. I stepped out onto the terrace for air. The harbor stretched out under a black sky. The water was restless, chopped by wind. The cold hit my face like a slap, sharp enough to wake me up. I leaned on the railing and watched the lights glitter across the waves. Somewhere out there, a buoy bell clanged, slow and hollow, like a warning. Behind me, laughter spilled onto the terrace. Two men in tux jackets, loose ties, that warm, drunken confidence that comes from never being told no. One of them was talking about my friend at City Hall. The other was complaining about staff shortages like it was a personal insult. I didn't listen. I just stood there and let the wind clear my head. The truth wasn't one big moment. It was 1,000 little ones, stacked so carefully you could pretend it was nothing, until the pile reached the ceiling and collapsed. A warm body brushed past me, my girlfriend. She didn't stop, but she paused close enough that I caught her perfume. Something expensive and floral that always made me think of clean hotel sheets. "Don't do that again," she whispered without turning her head. She smiled at someone across the terrace, kept her face angled toward the crowd. "Not tonight." The phrase didn't hit me like an insult. It hit me like a confirmation. Not "don't accuse me," not "we should talk," not "why would you say that," not tonight. Because there would be other nights. Because this wasn't a mistake. This was a lifestyle. I watched her walk away again. Back into warmth. Back into light. Back into the room where everyone liked her better than they liked the truth. I stayed outside until my fingers started to go numb. Then I went back in. She was at the center of a small group now. Men orbiting her, drawn in by her laughter, her confidence, her dress. One of them touched her elbow when he spoke, too familiar for a stranger. She didn't pull away. She didn't even notice. Or she noticed and liked it. I felt something inside me shift, not heartbreak. Heartbreak is soft. This was harder. This was the click of a lock. I wandered toward the bar, more for something to do than because I wanted a drink. A waiter slid past carrying a tray of tiny desserts that looked like they'd been engineered, not baked. A woman in pearls laughed too loudly at something unfunny. A man with perfect hair bragged about a deal he'd almost closed. And through it all, my girlfriend moved like she owned the place. She caught my eye once, just once. And the look she gave me wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was irritation, like I'd made her night slightly less smooth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One vibration. I pulled it out, expecting nothing. A spam call, a work alert, a friend asking if I wanted to watch the game this weekend. Anything normal. Instead, it was a bank notification, a deposit. Not huge, but not small enough to be meaningless. The sender name was right there, crisp and official, like it had always belonged in my life. Elliot Marsh. For a second, I just stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. The room noise faded, replaced by the sound of my pulse in my ears. Elliot Marsh wasn't a random guy. He wasn't a friend. He wasn't networking. He was a sponsor, a donor, a man whose money came with access, and now his money had touched our account. My girlfriend's laughter rang out across the room, bright, effortless, perfectly timed. I looked up at her, still smiling, still shining, and I realized something simple and ugly. This wasn't going to end with a conversation. This was going to end with consequences. The next morning, she kissed me like nothing had happened. Not a kiss. A clean little press on the cheek while she scrolled her phone, already half gone, already somewhere else. Her hair was damp from the shower and she smelled like that expensive citrus body wash she only used on days she expected to be touched by someone who wasn't me. "Big day," she said, voice bright. "I might be late." "Of course," I said, and my brain, helpful as ever, added, "Late is what liars call it when they don't want to say where they are." She glided through the kitchen in socks that cost more than my first car payment. She didn't look at the bank notification. She didn't ask why I'd been quiet. She didn't ask anything that might require her to face the fact that I was a human being instead of an accessory. The door clicked shut behind her, and the house finally exhaled. I stood there for a full minute, not moving, staring at the spot where she'd been. The quiet felt thick, like the air had turned into syrup. Somewhere outside, the wind scraped along the siding, Greyhaven wind, salt and old secrets. My phone was still in my hand. Elliot Marsh. Deposit. Our shared account. A sane person might have called the bank, or screamed, or done something dramatic. I did something worse. I made coffee, because coffee was normal, and normal was camouflage, and because if I stopped moving, If I sat down and let it hit me all at once, I'd either break or do something stupid. I didn't want stupid. I wanted precise. I worked in risk and compliance for a hospital network. That meant two things. I knew how people got caught, and I knew how they almost got caught and then talked their way out of it. Most disasters weren't explosions. They were paper cuts that someone ignored until the bleeding didn't stop. I also knew the line, the legal line, the moral line, the "you'll regret this in a courtroom" line. And I wasn't interested in becoming the villain in her story the easy way. So I built a file, not on my work laptop, not on anything that belonged to my employer, just a plain folder on my personal computer named something boring, Home Repairs, because nothing screams I'm hiding something like naming it Proof of Betrayal. I started with what was mine, our bank statements, shared finances, shared obligations, things I had every right to look at. The deposit wasn't labeled gift, it wasn't labeled loan. It was labeled like it had been laundered through respectability. Consulting. I almost laughed, almost. Consulting. Like my girlfriend had sat in a sterile office, wearing a blazer, explaining synergy to a man who couldn't spell it. I pulled up the transaction details. The amount wasn't enough to buy silence forever, but it was enough to say, this wasn't flirting. This was investment. I took a screenshot. Then I did something simple. I opened our shared calendar. There it was, her week laid out like a lie map. Most of it looked normal. Meeting with designer. Supplier call. Lunch with Kira. Those were the safe labels, the kind you could read aloud at a dinner party, but buried between them was a recurring block she'd never mentioned. Annex office, 9:10 p.m., every Thursday. My girlfriend didn't have an annex office. Not yet. Her clinic wasn't even open. I stared at it until the words started to look like shapes instead of language. My coffee went cold. I heard a soft chime from the living room. Her iPad. She'd left it on the sofa last night, face up, plugged into the charger like she expected to come home and pick up exactly where she'd left off. It wasn't password locked because she trusted the house. Or she trusted me to stay in my lane. I walked over slowly, like it might bite. The screen was awake. A message thread sat open at the top because she'd been using it recently. Not hacking, not guessing passwords. Just the careless arrogance of a person who never thinks consequences will climb into bed beside her. I didn't touch anything at first. I just read what was there, like I was reading the autopsy report of my own relationship. Her name at the top. A contact photo that wasn't a face, just an abstract black and white image, artsy, anonymous. And then the words, not love poetry, 'cause this wasn't love. Logistics. I can't stay long, he's expecting me. Then tell him you're meeting donors. He gets weird when I'm late. Let him. You're not his project. A photo loaded, her in the museum bathroom mirror, dress slightly pulled down at one shoulder, mouth half open like she'd been laughing. The kind of photo you don't take for yourself. The kind you take to remind someone what they own. My stomach didn't flip. It sank. There's a difference. Flip is shock. Sink is recognition. Sink is your body saying, yeah, that tracks. I took one screenshot, then another. Then I stopped. Not because I suddenly grew a conscience, because I knew how it looked if you hoarded too much, if you became obsessive, if you turned into the crazy guy with a folder. I didn't need a folder. I needed a scalpel. I set the iPad down exactly where it was, like I'd never touched it, like I was a ghost haunting my own living room. Then I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to write a timeline on paper. Yes, paper. Because paper doesn't buzz. Paper doesn't tempt you into spiraling. Paper just sits there and tells you what you already know. Thursday nights, 9:10 p.m., Annex office, the deposit, the fundraiser. Her reaction when I named the names, surprise, not denial. And then, like my brain was trying to be helpful in the cruelest way possible, I remembered other little things. The new lingerie she claimed was for herself. The sudden interest in working late, the way she started treating our home like a hotel, somewhere she slept, somewhere she changed clothes, somewhere she recharged before she went back out to be admired. I heard my own voice in my head, dry and sarcastic. Congratulations, you're dating a press release. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and left the house. Not to follow her like a maniac, to confirm one detail, just one. The annex office wasn't some romantic nickname. It was a place, a real address, something that existed in the world outside my imagination. I drove downtown, parked across from the building listed on the calendar invite, and sat in my car with the engine off. The building was old brick and glass, the kind of renovated historic structure Greyhaven loved, preserved charm on the outside, sterile wealth on the inside. A plaque near the door listed tenants. Most were boring: accounting, real estate, consulting. Of course. I told myself I'd give it 10 minutes. If nothing happened, I'd leave. I wasn't going to become a character in one of those stories where a man loses his mind and ruins his own life. 10 minutes became 15. My hand stayed calm on the steering wheel, but my jaw ached from holding it shut. Then a car pulled up to the curb. Black, clean, expensive without being flashy. The driver didn't park in a spot. He stopped like the street belonged to him. A man stepped out. I didn't recognize him at first because I'd only seen him at a distance last night, half hidden behind donors and laughter. But then he turned, and the streetlight caught his face. Dr. Halden Rourke. And he moved the way men move when they've never had to ask permission. He looked at the building, glanced at his watch, then checked his phone, and smiled. My phone buzzed in my pocket, sudden and sharp. For a second I thought, impossible, that she'd somehow sensed me from across town, but it was another bank alert, not a deposit, a withdrawal, a transfer out of our shared account to a business name I didn't recognize, something innocuous, something that sounded like a vendor, but the memo line was what made my skin go cold. Annex office, monthly. I stared at it, breath shallow, as Dr. Rourke reached for the building's door, and the security guard inside stepped forward to greet him like he was expected. I didn't follow him inside. That was important. Not morally, strategically. I didn't need to see what happened behind that door. I already knew enough. And more importantly, I knew where the line was. Crossing it wouldn't make me smarter. It would make me sloppy. So I stayed in the car and watched the door close behind Dr. Halden Rourke, like the end of a sentence. Then I started the engine and drove home. The house felt different when I walked in. Same furniture, same light through the windows, same faint hum from the refrigerator, but now it had a shape to it. Like a crime scene before the tape goes up. Everything exactly where it's supposed to be, except the truth, which is bleeding quietly under the floorboards. I didn't touch the iPad again. I didn't check her messages. I didn't replay the screenshots like a masochist. Instead, I opened my laptop and did something far more dangerous. I planned. I drew a clean line down the page and wrote 2 words at the top. 2 days. Not because I was giving her time, because I was giving myself structure. 2 days was long enough to prepare and short enough to keep me from losing my nerve. Day 1, containment. Day 2, consequences. I started with containment. Our finances were intertwined in the way modern couples like to call efficient, and later discover is actually exposed. Joint checking, shared credit line. A savings account earmarked for the clinic launch that I'd contributed to because she'd called it our future, and I'd believed her. I logged in and did exactly what I was legally allowed to do. I removed my automatic contributions. I moved my personal savings into an individual account. I flagged the shared account for dual authorization on outgoing transfers over a certain amount, something we'd agreed on months ago when we were being responsible adults. A setting she'd forgotten existed. I didn't drain anything. I didn't hide money. I didn't touch a dollar that wasn't mine. I just closed the door she'd been sneaking through. Then I picked up my phone and made one call. Not to a lawyer, not yet. To Marcus. Marcus ran facilities and security for the hospital network. We weren't friends in the beer and burgers sense. We were friends in the way men who'd seen ugly things together are friends. Mutual respect, clean favors. Quick question, I said when he answered. Hypothetical, he snorted. They always are. If someone who isn't on a property lease keeps showing up after being told not to, I said, what's the cleanest way to make sure they don't come back? A pause. Paper shuffling. Trespass notice, Marcus said. Written. Served. 1 warning. After that, it's not a misunderstanding anymore. Does it help if there are witnesses? I asked. It helps if you don't want it turned around on you, he said. Why? No reason, I said. Just organizing my life. He didn't push. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. When I hung up, I stared at the blank wall for a long moment and felt something settle inside my chest. Not rage, resolve. The house was quiet until evening. She came home late. Of course she did. I heard her keys at the door, the practiced jingle, the rhythm of someone who expected to be welcomed. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag, and walked into the kitchen already talking. You would not believe the day I had, she said, pulling a bottle of water from the fridge. Everything that could go wrong did. I leaned against the counter and watched her. She was flushed, energized, alive in a way she hadn't been with me in months. Sounds exhausting, I said. She drank, then smiled at me. You have no idea. There it was again, the line. The space between us filled with things she wouldn't say. She set the bottle down and glanced at the counter where my laptop sat closed. Her eyes lingered just a beat too long. You're awfully quiet today, she said lightly. Did I upset you last night? I shrugged. Did you? She laughed, relief flooding her face. See? This is why I love you. You're not dramatic. I almost laughed at that. Almost. She moved closer, slid her arms around my waist from behind. The contact felt rehearsed, like muscle memory trying to override instinct. We're good, right? She murmured into my shoulder. I can't deal with stress at home right now. Stress, not guilt, not honesty. Stress. I turned slightly so she had to look at me. We're fine, I said. You said it yourself. Guys are always interested. Her smile froze for half a second. Then she rolled her eyes playfully. Oh my God, you're still on that? I'm not on anything, I said. I just listen. She searched my face, looking for something. Anger, maybe. Accusation. Permission to fight. She found nothing, and that unsettled her. She pulled away and grabbed her bag. I'm going to shower. Long day. Of course, I said. The water started a minute later. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to it run. I imagined her standing under it, letting it wash the day off her skin, the lies sliding down the drain with the soap. When the bathroom door closed again, I checked my phone. No new alerts. Good. Day 1 was holding. Day 2 would be louder. The next morning she was distracted. Her phone never left her hand. She smiled at it, frowned at it, typed fast, then slower, then stopped and deleted entire messages like she was editing reality. Big meeting tonight, she said between sips of coffee. Might be another late one. Annex office? I asked casually. The word landed between us like a dropped plate. She blinked. Once. Twice. What? I took a bite of toast, chewed, swallowed. You've been saying meeting a lot, I said. I just assumed. Her laugh was too sharp. You're imagining things. Maybe, I said. Wouldn't be the first time. She stared at me, trying to decide if this was the moment to push back, to flip the script, to make me the problem. Then she smiled again. You worry too much, she said. That's your thing. She kissed my cheek and grabbed her coat. As the door closed behind her, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. You'll lose more than a relationship. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then I smiled. because threats only come when someone's scared, and because now I knew something important. They were watching me, which meant it was already working. The sponsor dinner was invitation only, which is how people in Greyhaven like to say controlled. Private room, private menu, private smiles. The kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen because bad things were bad for reputations. She told me I didn't need to come. Not directly. She phrased it like a kindness. "It's just donors and bored people," she said, while adjusting her earrings in the mirror. "You'll be bored." Bored. That word again, the one she used when she meant inconvenient. "I'll survive," I said. She hesitated. Just a breath. Just enough to confirm I'd made the right decision. The restaurant sat on the harbor, all glass and brushed steel, built where an old cannery used to rot. You could still smell salt and decay if the wind shifted right. Greyhaven loved that kind of irony. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Not dramatic late, strategic late. Late enough that everyone had settled into their roles. The private room was already buzzing when I stepped in. Low laughter, crystal clinking, the soft confidence of people who believed their names protected them. She was at the center of it, of course. Her back was to me, white dress catching the light, posture perfect. One hand rested lightly on the table as she leaned in to listen to a man with silver hair and a donor's smile. Dr. Halden Rourke stood just to her right, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Almost. She laughed at something he said and placed her hand briefly on his forearm. Briefly, casually, intimately. I let the door close behind me. The sound wasn't loud, but it traveled. Heads turned. She felt it before she saw me. I could tell by the way her shoulders stiffened, by the way her laugh trailed off like a car running out of gas. Then she turned. The smile on her face didn't disappear. It rearranged itself. Polite surprise layered over irritation, layered over calculation. "Hey," she said too brightly. "I didn't know you were coming." "I was in the neighborhood," I said. "Thought I'd say hello." Dr. Rourke's eyes flicked over me, assessing. He smiled the way men smile when they think they already know the ending. "Well," he said smoothly, extending a hand, "you must be—" I shook it. Firm, calm, just long enough. "I know who you are," I said. "We've met, several times." His smile tightened. "Of course." She jumped in quickly. "He works in hospital administration," she said, as if translating me into something harmless. "He's very detail-oriented." "I imagine," Rourke said. I took an empty chair and sat. No one asked me to leave. That was the funny thing. Once you were inside the room, once your presence could be justified with even the thinnest thread of legitimacy, people were afraid to make a scene. They'd rather endure discomfort than risk being remembered as the one who caused trouble. I ordered water. Let them talk. They discussed funding timelines, regulatory approvals, press strategy. I listened and filed things away. Who deferred to whom? Who avoided eye contact? Who stiffened when certain words came up? Reputation, compliance, oversight. Every time one of those words floated through the air, Rourke's jaw tightened just a bit. At one point, one of the donors, a woman with pearls and the expression of someone who'd never been contradicted, turned to me. "And what do you do exactly?" she asked. I smiled. "I make sure people don't accidentally destroy what they're building." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. Rourke didn't. Dinner stretched on. Wine flowed. Stories got louder. Confidence grew sloppy. That was when Rourke leaned toward me, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You like playing games?" he asked. "I like clarity," I said. He chuckled. "Then let me be clear. You're out of your depth." I met his eyes, held them. "Funny," I said. That's what men usually say right before they realize they've been standing in the wrong place. His smile vanished for a fraction of a second. Then my girlfriend stood abruptly. "I'm going to check on something," she said, already gathering her clutch. Excuse me. She didn't look at either of us as she left. Rourke exhaled through his nose. She worries too much. She should, I said. He turned toward me fully now. The friendliness dropped. You think you're protecting her, he said. You're not. You're a complication. I leaned back in my chair. And you're a liability. That did it. His face hardened. Be careful. I am, I said. That's why I'm still sitting here. He stared at me for a long moment, then stood and smoothed his jacket. I hope you know, he said, voice carrying just enough to be polite, that people talk. So do documents, I said quietly. He walked out without another word. The room exhaled collectively as if a storm had passed. My girlfriend returned a minute later, eyes sharp, smile pasted on. We should go, she said to me through clenched teeth. Of course, I said. In the car, she didn't speak until we were halfway home. What are you doing? She finally asked. Eating dinner, I said. Don't, she snapped. Don't play dumb. I looked at the road. Then don't play innocent. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You're imagining threats where there aren't any. My phone buzzed in my pocket. This time it wasn't a threat. It was an email from one of the clinic's primary sponsors. Subject line, compliance review. Temporary hold, I didn't show it to her. Not yet. I just smiled to myself as the streetlights streaked past. Because now the wheel was turning, and wheels don't stop just because someone begs. The next day was chaos. Not loud chaos, quiet chaos. The kind that starts with whispers and ends with doors closing softly but firmly. She paced the living room with her phone pressed to her ear, voice tight. Yes, I understand. No, of course we take this seriously. It must be some misunderstanding. She stopped pacing when she noticed me watching. Can you not just sit there? She snapped, covering the phone. I raised an eyebrow. Am I in the way? She turned her back on me and continued whispering. I checked my own phone. Marcus had texted. If you're doing what I think you're doing, you should know. Rourke resigned from the advisory board this morning. Not officially announced yet. I let that sink in. Resigned. Not fired. Not accused. Running before the fire reached the curtains. She hung up and stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. What did you say? She demanded. What did you tell people? Nothing, I said truthfully. I didn't have to. Her breath hitched. They're pausing funds. They're asking questions. This can't be happening right now. I stood and stepped closer, keeping my voice low. You built this on a lie, I said. Lies don't hold weight. Tears welled up in her eyes. Not remorse, not guilt. Fear. Please, she said. You're going to ruin everything. I leaned in, close enough that she could smell the coffee on my breath. No, I said softly. I'm just not stopping it anymore. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen and went pale. I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. And somewhere across town, Dr. Halden Rourke was realizing that the ground under his feet wasn't as solid as he'd always believed, which meant it was time for the part that didn't involve words at all. I didn't go looking for him. That's the part people always get wrong later. They imagine obsession, stalking, wild eyes in the dark. They need that version because it makes the ending feel safer, cleaner. The truth was simpler. He came to me. It happened the night after the sponsor freeze went public, not in the papers, not yet, but in the way Greyhaven really communicated. Phone calls that didn't get returned, meetings that were postponed, smiles that turned cautious. I was in the garage, reorganizing tools that didn't need reorganizing, when the motion lights flared to life. Bright, sudden, violent. A shape froze at the edge of the driveway. Dr. Halden Rourke stood there in a dark coat, hands visible, posture controlled but tight. His car idled at the curb like it didn't want to be there any more than he did. I didn't reach for anything. I didn't shout. I didn't step forward. I just leaned against the work bench and waited. You have a minute? he called out. Depends, I said. You planning on staying? He forced a smile. Just a conversation. Conversations usually start with invitations, I said. You're trespassing. That word hit him harder than anything else I could have said. He glanced back toward the street, then at the house, then at the floodlights washing him clean of shadows. I didn't mean, I know, I said. You're not used to rules. I stepped forward just enough for the light to catch my face fully. Calm, awake, not angry. I'm going to ask you to leave, I continued. Slowly, and then I'm going to hand you something. His jaw flexed. You think you've won something. I think you're standing in the wrong place, I said, and held out an envelope. He hesitated, then took it. A formal trespass notice. Clean, legal, dated, signed, prepared earlier that day with Marcus's help. His eyes scanned it, faster and faster. You can't be serious. I am, I said. If you come back after tonight, the conversation changes. He looked up at me, anger flashing through the panic. You're making a mistake. I stepped closer, not into his space, just close enough that he had to decide whether to back up. I'm making a boundary, I said. Mistakes are what you made when you assumed no one would stop you. He laughed, short, sharp. You think this scares me? I reached out and tapped the hood of his car. 2 fingers, light. The sound echoed in the garage like a gavel. I think, I said, you already checked over your shoulder twice before you got out of that car. He didn't answer. I also think, I added, you should check your email when you get home. The board doesn't like surprises, especially patterns. His face drained of color. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but the words came out wrong, too fast. I know 3 names, I said. I know 1 resignation, and I know you're not brave. You're just insulated. That did it. He stepped back, just 1 step, but it was enough. This isn't over, he said. No, I agreed. It's just not yours anymore. He folded the notice, got back into his car, and drove away without looking at me again. The lights dimmed. The night exhaled. Inside the house, my girlfriend was sitting on the edge of the couch, phone clutched in both hands like it might bite her. You talked to him, she said the moment I stepped in. Briefly, I said. Her eyes were red. Not from crying, from thinking too hard. He's panicking, she said. They're all panicking. Do you understand what you've done? I set my keys down carefully. I stopped pretending. She stood and walked toward me, hands shaking now. You don't get it, she said. This wasn't just physical. I know, I said. It was leverage. She froze. That was the moment, the exact one, when she realized I wasn't guessing anymore. He helped me, she whispered. He opened doors. He introduced people. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, I said. You just picked the one that cost you me. She broke then, not elegantly, not like in movies. Her face twisted, voice cracking. Please, she said. Fix this. You're good at fixing things. I looked at her, the woman I'd loved, the woman who'd called me boring, safe, a placeholder, and felt something final click into place. I'm not your damage control, I said. Her phone buzzed again. She looked down and screamed, not loud, not dramatic. A sharp, broken sound like something tearing. What? I asked calmly. They pulled the lease, she said, breath hitching. The clinic, the board voted. They're distancing themselves. They said my name is radioactive. I nodded. Greyhaven hates embarrassment. She slid down onto the floor, back against the couch. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I crouched in front of her, keeping my voice level. You meant for it to go exactly as far as it benefited you. She looked up at me, eyes wide and wet. What do you want? I stood. For you to understand, I said. This is the last time we talk like this. The next morning was the opening event. The ribbon cutting, the press walk-through, the last attempt to pretend everything was fine. She went anyway, so did I. The clinic lobby was all glass and white space and fake calm, cameras everywhere, donors whispering, staff smiling too hard. Dr. Halden Rourke wasn't there. That was the first crack. I felt it shift the moment I stepped inside. Conversations stalled. Eyes followed me. Someone whispered my name like it was a rumor. She spotted me across the room and went pale. Not angry this time. Terrified. She intercepted me halfway, grabbing my arm. "Not here," she hissed. "Please." I looked down at her hand, gently removed it. "This is exactly where," I said. She swallowed. "You'll destroy me." I leaned in, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You destroyed yourself," I said. "I just stopped holding the walls up." The host tapped the microphone. Applause rippled. The moment arrived like a held breath, and I stepped forward. The microphone hummed when I took it from the host. That sound, small, electrical, cut through the room sharper than shouting ever could. Conversations stalled. Smiles froze mid-expression. Cameras tilted, hungry and obedient. Greyhaven loved moments like this, public, polite, potentially ruinous. "I won't take much time," I said, voice steady, calm enough to make people lean in. "I know today is about celebration." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. My girlfriend stood near the back, rigid, hands clenched at her sides. Her eyes never left my face. Not blinking, not breathing properly. "I'm listed," I continued, "as a partner on several early documents tied to this clinic. Mostly as a guarantor. Mostly as someone who believed in the vision." A pause. Just long enough. "And as someone whose professional responsibility is risk." That word did it. Donors shifted. Staff exchanged glances. One of the board members straightened like he'd just remembered an appointment. "I'm not here to accuse anyone of crimes," I said. "There are none. I'm not here to tell private stories." That was technically true. "I'm here to clarify why several sponsors initiated a compliance review yesterday." A low murmur moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. I turned slightly and nodded to the AV technician, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The screen behind me lit up. Not photos, not messages. Text, clean, black and white. Dates and names blurred where they didn't matter. One sentence, centered. "He's safe, he's useful, but he's temporary." My girlfriend made a sound then, a small one, like air escaping a punctured tire. "I received this," I said evenly, "on a shared device, no passwords broken, no privacy invaded, just carelessness." I let that sit. "This sentence," I continued, "was sent to a man who held financial and advisory influence over this clinic." Whispers turned sharp. "I won't name him," I said, "because he already resigned." That landed harder than anything else. Someone gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. "He resigned," I repeated, "after the board became aware of a pattern. Not an affair. A pattern. Of influence crossing into intimacy. Of access traded for leverage." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "In institutions like ours," I said, "patterns matter more than intent." I looked straight at her then. Not with anger, with clarity. "This clinic was built on trust," I said, "and trust is the only asset that can't survive embarrassment." The room had gone very still. I stepped back from the microphone and handed it to the host, who looked like he'd aged 5 years in 30 seconds. That should have been it. But Dr. Halden Rourke chose that moment to make a mistake. He came in through the side entrance, late, breathing hard, jacket unbuttoned, the confident rhythm gone from his step, eyes locked on me. Security moved instinctively, but he waved them off, smile cracking as he advanced. "You think you're clever," he said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. You think this ends you as the hero? The room erupted into noise. Protests, shouts, phones lifting. I didn't move. He closed the distance too fast, rage spilling over control, and grabbed my sleeve. Not a punch. Worse, a desperate public touch. Security surged forward. I stepped back cleanly, letting his hand slip away like it was nothing. Don't, I said quietly. He lunged again. That's when security took him, hands on shoulders, firm, controlled, professional. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted his name, someone else shouted mine. My girlfriend stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth open, watching the last illusion she'd believed in collapse in real time. Rourke twisted in security's grip, face red, mask finally gone. "This isn't over," he shouted. I met his eyes. "No," I said. "It's documented." That broke him. He was dragged away, shouting now, the sound raw and ugly, echoing off the white walls like a confession. The lobby exploded into motion. Board members huddled. Donors stepped back. Phones buzzed like hornets. My girlfriend stumbled toward me. "Please," she whispered. "Say something. Fix it." I looked at her hand reaching for my arm, and didn't take it. "I already did," I said. I turned and walked out. The automatic doors slid open, spilling cold coastal air into the lobby. Wind hit my face, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of salt and distance. Behind me, the clinic sign flickered once, then went dark. The doors closed behind me with a soft, pneumatic sigh. No applause, no music, just wind. Greyhaven's harbor stretched out ahead, black water broken by whitecaps, the buoy bell ringing slow and hollow like it had been doing for 100 years. Warning ships that thought they knew where they were going. I didn't look back. Inside, the damage was still spreading. Phones buzzing, sponsors retreating, names being erased from documents that had felt permanent an hour earlier. A man being escorted out by security, his confidence stripped down to noise. A woman standing in the wreckage of the life she'd been so sure she was managing. I walked down the steps and felt the cold settle into my bones. Not sadness, relief. My phone vibrated once, a single message from an unknown number. You didn't have to destroy everything. I stopped, read it, let the words hang there for a second longer than they deserved. Then I typed back, "I didn't." I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. I slid the phone into my pocket and kept walking. Behind me, a camera shutter snapped. Somewhere, someone would tell the story wrong. They always did. They'd say, I snapped, that I was jealous, that I couldn't handle success. Let them. The wind picked up, sharp and clean, tearing the last warmth from the night. I welcomed it. Cold made things honest. By the time I reached the end of the pier, the noise behind me had faded into something distant and unimportant. The bell rang again. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the water churn under the lights, unforgiving, restless, real. Then I turned away and didn't look back again.